build the leadership portion here. So the definition here was how to develop and follow a sense of purpose in themselves and in others. So part of that starts with looking inward, right? Developing a sense of purpose, because that's, for some people, I think maybe that feels almost innate, but sometimes you have to come up with that. And there's all kinds of leadership training and so on out there. But like when I think of Miles and me, and since we kind of grew into this stuff together, we'd both had programming jobs that we didn't really like, and worked in environments that we didn't really like, and kind of thought about, what was different about those, what was different about when it was good, and how can you actually create that kind of environment for others. And that's sort of, what the meetup is about to a degree. Creating the kind of environment where people can get together, feel safe, where less experienced folks aren't made to feel stupid, because everything now you used to not know, right? And like it was so helpful to us when we kind of joined that community that it was such a welcoming group, because we, only sort of knew what we were doing, working, because we had the experience of kind of being Dave Jones's boss twice at two different places, sort of, and like honestly, part of we listen to some podcasts about management and stuff like that, and read a lot of books on that topic. There's a really good one by the co-founder of Pixar, Ed Catmull. Has a really good book. Is it just called Creativity Inc.? Creativity Inc. Yeah, it's a really good book. I bet you have some favorite books about leadership and that kind of stuff. And you also, like, Apple had some really good training for that stuff. So I'm sure you have some good answers for how you can grow in that area. Just start bossing people around until you get really good at it. No, not that so much. Not that so much. Just take the computer away from them and do it.
No, but I mean, this is actually, I feel like, a really good definition, because so much of whether people follow you as a leader depends on whether you have an obvious sense of purpose. So I think a lot of it depends on you knowing why you are doing what you're doing. And then also, once you know what you're doing, can you articulate that reason to other people?
And will they believe you?
Yeah. Because, I mean, honestly, most people are looking for a reason to be excited about something. And if you're excited and can articulate why you're excited to somebody else, then it becomes much easier to follow you. I almost think of it like you could define how to do a job by giving a set of instructions, but there's no way you can ever possibly define instructions for every eventuality that might happen. And this gets more pronounced the larger your team is, right? So I can't define all these things for every single individual and every single possibility that might come up. So how do I know if the people are actually going to make decisions that are in line with our goals? Well, I have to clearly define the goal first. If I've made a very clear vision of what we're trying to accomplish, it's almost like putting up guardrails. I can't define exactly what to do, but I know that if we're all trying to get to that same place, you're going to make a decision where even if it's not the exact decision I would have made, you're still trying to get to the same place. So overall, we all move in the same direction. And was that too vague, or was that? So there's a really good TED Talk. Is anybody familiar with Simon Sinek? Yeah, if you look up his TED Talk, it's called Start With Why. And it's about a lot of examples of super successful companies and how the reason that they're so successful is because they didn't focus on individual things about a product, what they're building, how they're building it, but why are they building it? So you look at a company like Apple, and it was all about, moving the whole human race forward with technology. They knew why they were building something, and it stood out so much from the other people who were just like, oh, we're going to make a better version of this software. Well, who cares? Like, why are you doing that thing? So to me, that's always been the big thing that's finally helped people see me as a leader when I'm in that sort of situation is, can I define some sort of vision for what we're trying to accomplish that everybody can get on board with?
Start With Why is also a book now. And like one thing I've noticed, hanging out with Seth and working with him on some projects, as you have no doubt noticed, if you ever got one-on-one help, he's very good at helping you reach the right conclusion and having you do as much of the work as possible, including like reaching the conclusion yourself. Ask questions that get them thinking about these things as opposed to just telling them, right? So we try to do that a lot in class. That kind of stuff helps too. Stuff that helps make other people better. I don't know. I feel like there was something specific I wanted to point out as an example there, but anyway, yeah. Good question. So how are your mock interviews? Fun? Anybody, whether in the mock interviews today or at any time, have you ever gotten an interview question where you're just like, what? What on earth am I supposed to do with that? Yeah, Josh, you seem excited.
Build a computer in the middle of the interview and answer interview questions while I was doing it.
Had you build a computer in the middle of the interview and answer questions while you did that?
And they didn't tell me the end goal was to build a computer.
Oh, and like not to let the questions distract you, or what?
Yeah, it was really weird.
That is really weird. What was the job?
It's like a night shift job where this guy doesn't answer tickets.
Interesting. That's a new one. Keith, were you raising your hand? Who was raising your hand?
I've had a couple where it's just like in a given moment you're going, why on earth were they asking me this? But you just answer it the best way you can and try and find the subtext as you're going. So I've had ones where it's like, I had one interview where they asked me like, I don't remember exactly what it was, but the subtext was entirely like, how are you with customer relations? And the question had nothing to do with customer relations. It was like, what's a time where you resolved a conflict with your friends?
Oh yeah. I've heard that one before.
Well, that is definitely had to do with customer relations for sure.
Yes. Yeah.
That's actually a good question.
I'm just
Yeah, conflict resolution,
I
that kind of
customer
stuff.
relations story, so I just was like,
Why?
this is a better example.
Why?
Yeah. So for customer relation related question, tell me about a time you resolved a conflict with your friends. That kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I had one where they gave me like 8 minutes to solve a riddle.
8 minutes to solve a riddle.
Yeah. Then I had to present why I thought that answer was right. The sets are perfect.
No, was it like a really off the wall questions like how many gallons flow through the Mississippi in a year or something like that?
It
Or?
was something like if you have these people and they have these different goals, but you only know so much about them, you have to figure out logically.
Oh, okay.
Like
Yeah.
who does what or something.
Logic puzzles, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of times they're just trying to see how you approach a problem that you have no idea how to solve, what your problem solving technique is, that kind of stuff. Kenny, what were you going to say?
It wasn't necessarily like picking the question. I think like the way they're phrasing their questions, some of them sound like rhetorical. And so like I'd be sitting there and then like somebody else would walk into the interview and then somebody would leave. And like half the time I couldn't tell whether or not they were asking me a question or if they were just having a conversation with themselves. So I'm like, am I supposed to answer that? Or are you just answering your own question? I don't know what really happened.
Okay. Yeah, Chris?
One of them was, so it was just it was probably 5 minutes into the interview, and they had general questions up until then, and they asked, if you were an animal, what would you be and why?
That's a horrible question.
That is a terrible, that's a really terrible question.
Yeah.
That's
I don't know if
the
they
Barbara
were-
Walters, if you were a tree, what
Was
kind
that
of
from
tree
your
would you
interview
be?
No,
today?
not
Okay.
today. It was, I ended up getting that job, but I think they used that as some sort of an icebreaker or something.
Yeah, I was gonna say hopefully not.
I don't actually see.
Well, you said
Well,
weasels.
He didn't say cheetah, so I don't know.
I'm sorry, the correct answer was cheetah. One that the morning, several people in the morning class said this one was, what 3 words best describe you?
Those
Something like
suck. If you have to add a question before, it is awful. Another common one is like, name like a time when you failed,
Yep.
or what is your worst characteristic?
Yep. So
That's the one.
they're very, very common, right? If they say what's your worst characteristic or what's your biggest weakness or whatever? It's a terrible question for one thing because everybody's going to lie, right?
Yeah.
Not-
I'm too much of a people person.
Yes, exactly. I'm just too darn dedicated to my job. They don't want to hear I can't drag my butt out of bed in the morning, or I have a problem with authority, even if it's true. Yeah, that's kind of a silly one. But the other one about tell me about what
A time when you failed.
right, a time when you failed. So that's kind of a classic, and it can be kind of useful because they want to. Here's a little secret: you are going to make mistakes on your job. Absolutely, everyone does. It's impossible not to. And so, hearing how you dealt with that, like, did you panic and freak out, or did you fix it? Did you communicate with the people whose work you interrupted by messing up or whatever? What did you do about it? And when I was interviewing for my job in Bloomington, actually, I got the job anyway. But I told them this story because this is the worst mistake I've ever made at my job. I was very young, and the sole programmer at this place, and we didn't have a lot of change control in place to keep people from screwing things up royally. And I deleted the production database, which is basically the worst thing you can do. Now, the good news is, and as soon as I told that in the interview, they're like, eyes got so big, and I was like, wait, no, it turned out okay. We had backups and we had the transaction log, so we actually got it right up to the minute restored. It was okay, and in the meantime, people were able to continue to do their work by kind of doing some of the stuff manually the system did for it. It was an internal app. It wasn't customer facing. It was okay. But someone in the morning brought up there was actually a Reddit thread about this recently because someone had done this on one of their first days on the job, maybe their first day on the job. And what all the comments were saying was, that company should have had safeguards in place so that it's impossible for a junior dev to blow away the production database. They should not have write access to the production database. And that's true. And at large enterprises, there will be things in place for that. I should have had read-only access to that, because what I was trying to do was copy the production database to my development database, so I had up-to-date data to test some things against, and I copied it the other way around, which was real bad. Yeah. But I did get the job anyway. It took them a while to make the offer. It was like a month. I wonder if they offered to 5 other people first. Yeah.
Yeah, I had another one where they asked me, and I was applying for an IT position, but they asked me if you were to fire someone, how would you fire them?
Oh, if you were to fire someone, how would you fire them?
You're fired.
Do not pull the Donald Trump on that one.
That's that. All right. So I like that question. I don't like that question.
What was that question?
Tell me about a time you failed. I think that one
Okay, yeah,
is a really good one because it tells you two main things that you want to know as an employer. Like, are they self-aware? Like, have they taken the time to think about failures they've had and digest that and think about what they would do differently?
Exactly.
And yeah, that's really the biggest thing I would look for out of that. And then what Davey said too, did they handle that well, or at least learn from the experience? That one, unless you are, I'd be like, are you planning on having me fire people?
Is that my primary job function?
That's just a poor question, to be honest.
And
Follow-up question. How often do you fire me?
all right.
Right.
How are you going to fire me? So yeah, as far as the failure thing goes, with my example, not only did I tell them how we fixed it, but also about the safeguards we put in place afterwards, so that it would be impossible to do it again if I tried. Never log into the production database as a system administrator. You need to have other accounts that you use. So that kind of stuff. And yeah, I agree. That's not a bad question because you will make mistakes. Yeah, Kenny.
Just a general question on when they ask you these questions. So, if they were to say, do you have any experience with something like Ruby or something like that, and you're like, I don't even know what the heck Ruby is.
Mhm.
How do you go about answering that question if they're just like, nah, I don't want to hear it anymore? You know what I mean? Will they dismiss you just because you don't know one thing, or would they be more willing
I mean, that would be silly of them to do, unless like the job has in huge letters that this is the primary requirement of this job.
Right.
So no, I mean they're just trying to get a feel for what you know. Most places would not dismiss you because you haven't worked with one super specific technology, because like Seth said on the first day of the boot camp, you know, one of the things you hope to learn is how to learn new programming languages and new libraries and new frameworks quickly. We take consulting gigs not too infrequently where we don't actually know the specific technology that they're working with yet. But we've done that enough times that we know we can pick it up pretty quickly, and you know they've always been happy with the results. We've never taken one of those where it didn't work out.
And they do know that up front.
And yeah, of course we tell them
that.
Yes, right, right. I mean,
Like, yeah, we could do
you can
that.
say, oh yeah, we
You know,
totally,
we don't
yeah,
know.
we do that all the time. That's like,
I've heard this.
my dad is a Ruby.
I heard a story of a guy who he was luckily able to pull this off, but someone asked him, "Hey, have you ever worked with blank?" Never heard of it before. Oh yeah, I've done that before. That night went home. Gosh, learned as much as he could before going into the interview, and ended up nailing the interview. Don't do that.
Yeah, don't lie. Don't. Just tell the truth. Back to the like 3 words to describe you and stuff. Everyone groaned, but I thought I think you had a pretty good explanation of what they're looking for when they ask something like that.
I mean, really, it goes back to the self-awareness piece, because honestly, I will take somebody who has a strong sense of who they are over somebody who doesn't almost any day, as long as they know who they are and that's still a good person.
And that person's right.
Right.
I know I'm Jeffrey Dahmer.
Right. Because I think that self-reflection helps a lot with both understanding how to deal with other people, because you know yourself, so you know how you're going to relate to situations well. And it helps me as a boss. If you can describe yourself well, then I can know how to effectively manage you and give you tasks that are, you know, helpful to you and helpful to us, and just like to be able to manage you in general. And if somebody just kind of can't answer any questions about themselves, not that it's like if you choked on that one question, the interview would be over, but a lot of these questions have to do with, are you self-aware? Do you analyze things after the fact to learn from them? You know, if you can't articulate any of that stuff, I'm going to be really reticent to hire you, because I'm like, I don't know that you're going to be reliable, and I don't know how you're even going to act, because you don't have a good sense of who you are.
So it's worth devoting some energy to figuring that stuff out, not just for the sake of job interviews, but you know, for the sake of life. You know, figure that out about yourself, because I know you're a whopping like 19 and 20, but you may not be. This may not even be your final form. You may not have exactly evolved into the grown-up you're going to be. I sure as heck hadn't at 19. I thought I had, but I had not figured out what my values really were yet, and frankly, they turned out to be pretty different from what I thought they were. At that point, I thought I was, you know, my values were my parents' values, because that's all I knew. And then I figured out, well, I actually value some pretty different stuff.
I think a big thing that helped me with things like that is I like personality tests, because I think they are good at really like putting out there, like letting you know exactly like what it is about certain things that motivates you for your particular personality type, and not only that, but where your potential blind spots are. So you can be aware of them and work on them, and you can recognize when those things may happen and react to them much sooner than you would if you weren't aware of those things. Like I know that for me, one of the big blind spots for me is like I just don't care about people's feelings very much naturally. And so before I was aware of that, you know, it would come across that way. Like when I would try to help somebody, it might come across like very short or have very little patience with them, because it didn't cross my mind that like I should care about their feelings, right? And so it took a lot of awareness in that regard and practice with it, to the point where, you know, you can help someone that is primarily like an extroverted feeler and like not totally hate being around them, and you know, be able to interact with them well. And I know that's like another thing, like when I'm reading my personality profile, And it's funny because my dad's the same way. Like, I grew up thinking my dad was mad at me most of the time, just because, like, you know, RBF. Yeah. And some personalities, they just don't show a lot of emotion on their face, and it looks like they're just
Resting
angry
bottom
all the
face.
time. Yeah, resting bottom of the face. And, you know, I wasn't aware that I did that either, but then once I read that, and I'm asking people, they're like, yeah, you do kind of look mad a lot of the time. So, you know, it's just something to be aware of and that you can work on.
So the good news is, even if you're a sociopath like Seth, you can learn to fake human emotions. And-
Some of us get pretty good at it.
yeah, Josh.
How do we stay in contact with you after?
Oh, right.
Seemed very half-hearted.
Yeah, totally.
If they want to contact you, they'll let you know.
How about I put this up after I stop recording? But yeah, I mean, Slack isn't going away, as far as I know. It's up indefinitely. The one from last year is still up. So you can always stay in touch that way too. So yeah, I'll put our contact information up there at the very end. What else I want to say about job interviews and stuff? Well, a question I like to ask is, you know, tell something like, what's your favorite, you know, library or package or whatever. If I'm interviewing experienced developers, because it gives them an opportunity to talk about code, but it's their choice what they talk about. So like, I don't ask them, you know, what's your favorite thing about Rebase or whatever. I ask them, you know, tell me a package that you really like or that you used recently, and what you like about it, and so on, just to get them talking, so we can just kind of have a conversation about tech. I don't think whiteboard coding is particularly useful for telling how good someone is at something, because that tells you how good someone is at coding on a whiteboard under pressure, which probably isn't their job. So you know, that's one I like. A question somebody asked this morning, that they got asked, you know, tell me about a project you've worked on, and they're like, you know, what are they wanting to hear? Well, they're probably just trying to get you to talk about something, again, something of your choice, where you can demonstrate, you know, that you've solved problems, and we talked more specifically, like, dang, what did we talk about when we talked about that this morning? Like, tell me about a project you've worked on, or whatever. Just giving you an opportunity to talk about your experience, even if it's, you know, a student project or something. That just gives you a chance to talk on your own terms about something you did and the problems you solved. And, you know, if you did something really cool, tell them about that part. Or if there's a really nice bit of user experience, you know, tell them about that thing, or about how you noticed after a while that, you know, it didn't focus the right form field or whatever, or that the back button was kind of broken, and that you took the time to fix that or whatever. They're just trying to hear, you know, what your approach is like. This usually goes on absolutely as long as it can. What else do we usually talk about? What other questions do you have? Yeah, Kenny.
Do you guys usually ask about previous employers, like what their experiences were with those?
I mean, we usually know by the time we're talking to them. But, you know, we might have a specific question about, like, oh, what'd you do there? Or that kind of stuff.
I think in general, previous employers come up just as a result of other questions. Like,
Right.
I do like a lot of those example questions, like, tell me about a time when, you know, you tried really hard and failed, or tell me about a time, you know, just questions like that. So a lot of times that comes from previous work experience, those stories do. So, I mean, it's pretty rare that I would pick out a specific employer and ask, like, a specific question about it. It's more like you get a feel for it. And I will say that is a segue into one other thing I wanted to talk about, which is red flags in an interview. If you cannot find anything positive to say about a previous employer, that I will not hire you. Because guess what? Someday I'm going to be your previous employer, and you're going to be talking bad about me. It's kind of like that thing, like, if you meet a jerk, you know, it's possible they're a jerk. If everyone you meet is a jerk, maybe you're the jerk, right? So,
if every job sucks,
right.
maybe.
Yeah. And it seems obvious, but I've done a lot of interviews, and there are people that do that. Like, well, you know, why do you want to work here? Oh, it just, my old job sucks and the boss is terrible and all the people I work with are jerks. And you're like, well, yeah, okay.
My brother-in-law once, this was a long time ago, but he had a job interview, and they asked him why he was leaving his current job. And he said, well, I can't get along with the people, or I don't like the people. And they said, well, we have people here too. It was like, yeah, maybe that wasn't the right thing to say. You don't really want to send the message that you can't get along with folks.
So that's not to say that you can't say things about previous employers that you didn't agree with or you thought could have been better. That's different.
Yeah.
But yeah, if it's on more of like an emotional level or
Yeah.
like you just can't get along with people like that,
Yeah.
it's not good.
If your responsibilities weren't what you thought they were going to be, like me at that one job, that's another story. Like I wanted to do more actual programming because I hadn't gotten to do that for a while. That's a good explanation of my situation at that time. Also, inevitably at the end of an interview, they'll ask you if you have any questions for them, right? Yes. Make sure you have some, which a lot of times, again, with any luck, the interview will turn into kind of a conversation, and questions will just come up kind of naturally along the way. But it is good to kind of be prepared with something like that. And there are some that are useful almost any time. And it's not just for the sake of the interview, so that they say, "Oh, this person had a question. Very good." It's also because whether you have to decide whether you want this job too, and so you want some idea of what it's like to actually work there. Seth always has a really good go-to question for this. I'll let him say it.
Sure. Yeah, so there's a couple of variations, but kind of like, yeah, always have at least one or two like fallback questions in case you don't have any other questions that came up organically. One of the worst things that can happen as an interview is you get to the end and you're like, hey, do you have any questions for us? And they're like, no. I'm like, cool, guess we're done. But yeah, so one that I really enjoy to use when I'm interviewing is something to the effect of, if I were to get hired here tomorrow, in 90 days from now, if you were to look back at what had occurred during those 90 days, what would happen to say that was a good hire? Like what would I have to do during that time frame for you to feel good about me working here? Because that really tells you a lot about what their priorities are for their employees, like what they expect out of you. Do they have reasonable expectations for what you can accomplish in 90 days? And a lot about the traits of people that they look for. Let's see, what's a variation of that? Another variation of that I like is, what are some of the traits of some of the most successful people on your team? Because again, it's just really giving you an idea of what they value as an organization and on their team specifically. So it's a good one to figure out if you want to work there. Like, are the things they value things that you also value? Can they even articulate that? That's another good point of that question. Do they have clearly defined goals for you and for people who are successful? But yeah, some variation of that to figure out what they view as success.
Yeah, Alex.
What do we have to do so that we would be ready to be hired by you?
You have to wait till this backlist becomes bigger. Depends on the company and depends on how big you want to see the company in the future.
Assuming that we're busy enough, right?
It's a general question.
Yeah, assuming that we were hiring, right?
Yeah, it's a general question. Any other?
Yeah, I mean, so the truth is, we've hired a relatively small number of people over the years at Fretless. We've hired some more people at our previous jobs, but involvement in the community is a really good way to make us see you and to notice like who's good. Because again, Dave Jones, we met at the meetup. Seth was a student at a boot camp, but then was also really, really involved in the community as soon as he got involved at all, and like started teaching little 1 hour lunchtime. What do you call those things?
They call it crash course.
Yeah, crash courses and stuff almost as soon as he could. Did a presentation in NDRB. Like he just decided, I'm going to learn everything there is to know about this one very specific feature. Like really dig into it, and then I'm going to tell people about it. So that kind of stuff. You know, do you communicate well? Do you have code that's out there? Because you know, you don't have to have a ton of open source stuff, but it really, really helps. In our case, everyone we've ever hired, we hired on contract first. Like they did something for us as a contractor. So that gives you, you know, a much better opportunity than coding on a whiteboard to see, you know, how they actually do when they're assigned some work to get done. And I know that's what Basecamp does too with technical hires. They always give them a project to do on an hourly basis first. So you know, that's another thing. But you know, demonstrate that enthusiasm, and that you know, clearly want to continue learning. You know, on the technical capability front, you know, those yeah, it's still up here. Demonstrate that you're technically curious and that you don't give up when you have a problem, and that you're interested even if you're not quite capable yet, but you're interested in producing solutions that other people can make sense of, that other people can maintain. Because if you can develop a complex solution that less experienced people can actually read and figure out, you know, that's huge. So, you know, those are the kinds of developers we want. And, you know, the truth is we're kind of a seniors only place at this point because of the nature of the work we do. But like in the case of Seth, we knew we really wanted him, even though he obviously didn't have the only thing he was lacking was experience. Even in the technical capability, you know, you read those things, those were true about him. He just hadn't ever like written a program before. So, you know, it's just a matter of getting a few of those under his belt. So we hired him on a contract basis actually to teach a boot camp, which was, we put him in kind of a terrifying position. I'm still sorry, but I had no choice. So yeah, I hired it. So the first boot camp he took from me, the 7-day thing, was JavaScript. And then he did the 12-week boot camp at the Iron Yard, which was Ruby on Rails. And when that was finished, there was 1 week in between. I had to teach an earlier version of this boot camp, and it was AngularJS. And Seth didn't know AngularJS. Or JavaScript, really. He'd spent 1 week on it, right? I was like, hey, I need a teaching assistant for this thing. Would you do it? And he agreed to do it, and we're going to pay him hourly. And you know, he throws himself into something if he's going to learn a technology. He really kind of goes nuts with it, immersing himself in that thing. And good thing, because so like in the beginning, what that kind of amounted to was like I did most of the talking, and he would kind of take the notes as I did it. And so he would kind of get to learn JavaScript almost as a participant of the class, but like having to come up with the examples for the website and all that stuff, you know, he had kind of no choice but to learn it even better. And it was like this where there was a morning and an afternoon. And so he could kind of use the afternoon session to just study. Because then I dropped this on him. I had a 2-week trip that I absolutely had to take smack in the middle of the thing. It was an 8-week boot camp, all the same students the whole time. And I had to be gone for 2 weeks. It was my parents' anniversary. This was non-negotiable. And I had tried for months to find someone to substitute for those 2 weeks. Still couldn't find anybody. So I was like, hey, Seth, you think in about 4 weeks you'd be in a position to teach a little of this? And he lied and said, sure. No. So yeah, tell us about the fear and what you did about it, how you turned that fear into productivity.
Yeah. I think that's the closest I've ever been to a panic attack in my life, to be honest. So like I had to go from not really knowing JavaScript to teaching for 2 weeks straight in 4 weeks. Yeah, so that's what I spent all my spare time doing, was studying. And luckily, like a couple weeks into it, so we still had, a week or two before you actually had to be gone.
Right.
We kind of worked out a deal where like I would write the notes in the morning, and in the afternoon I would just go to the library and work on programs in Angular to build projects that we would do for those 2 weeks. So, but yeah, it worked out.
Yeah, and then the timing of it was such that we spent a lot more time on vanilla JavaScript and even a week on jQuery and then and Ajax and stuff like that. So we hadn't gotten very deep into into Angular, which is a little bit like React, but it's a full-blown framework. More than just like the Vue, but something kind of component-oriented. So we hadn't gotten too deep in that. So what he needed to do basically was, write something based on all the tutorials he'd read and all that stuff, and then walk them through how to write that thing themselves, teaching certain concepts along the way, which is still a ton of work. But yeah, again, results not typical that he was able to pull it off, but he totally pulled it off, and it was awesome, and everyone loved him. Also, typically, we don't throw people into the fire quite to that degree, but we had no other choice. So then after that was over, and that was all on a contract basis, then we were like, gosh, we want to hire him full-time as soon as we know we have customers for him. But we just continued to pay him hourly for a while. And so then the next month, we did 2 different projects that we spent about a week or 2 on that were Ruby on Rails. Then we spent a couple weeks doing one that was supposed to be Rails, but it ended up being almost all CSS. So it was like this opportunity to really dig into CSS, do some crazy responsive design where like the page layout totally changed when the screen got really narrow, like phone sized, which was actually really fun. And then we gave him his first solo gig, which was it 3 weeks? Mm-hmm. Writing plugins for CK Editor, which is a WYSIWYG editor for JavaScript, a rich text editor. And he knew JavaScript by then, mostly. Never done CK Editor before. But again, the customer knew that, and you figured it out pretty fast, and they were really happy with the results.
Yeah, it was interesting though, because this was terrifying. So this is my first gig on my own, and I go in there the first day, and all of their developers work in one office, and they're all like around the periphery of the room, and they all use these like 40-inch HD TVs as their second monitor, and theirs are all like facing the wall, right? So they're working and they're facing away. I look at the open desk, and it's like my TV is like facing the middle.
It's up on the wall like
this
this.
Giant facing everybody. I'm like, I hope I'm doing good.
And of course, we wouldn't have of course asked him if he thought he could do it first before we like signed a contract for this. But we'd already seen, his mistake was doing this stuff and succeeding at it, because now we just think we can do this to him anytime. So then the next thing we did was I was going to be working on this project for like 7 months, and we thought, you know what, let's just give them buy one get one free for a few months. Let's just say, hey, Seth's coming with me, so he's really smart and can figure this stuff out really fast, but he is new, and I know you kind of only want one person, but we're just gonna give you the 2 of us for the time being, and then in a couple months we'll have to either you'll have to start paying for him or he's going to go on to another project. But we just did that. We just paid his, and that's when we hired him full time. Just started paying his salary because we wanted him on the team so bad, even though we didn't have a paying client for him. We just put him on the thing I was on, so he could start getting that experience, because we knew that was the thing he needed. He just needed lots of experience, and that was a great opportunity because it was an existing team of like 8 people. So it was an opportunity to actually be on a real development team that used Agile and stuff like that, Scrum. So very real experience, and it was, but of course it was in a different technology yet. It was Angular 2, which is a complete rewrite from Angular 1, almost nothing in common with it, and it's also in TypeScript instead of plain JavaScript, which is basically ES6, a superset of ES6 with typing. And neither of us had done it before. And they knew that, but they also knew that we had taught Angular 1. So we figured we could pull it off, and it went pretty well. And then that turned into making a mobile app using Ionic, using Angular 2. So for iOS and Android. We'd never done that before, but we did it, and it was great. And yeah, when the first 3 months were up, they were totally ready to start paying for them. I figured that would happen. Once they got their taste for free, they would want more of that Seth kick. And that's exactly what happened. So that worked out great too. And then TechPoint came along and was like, how about you teach React this year? And we were like, oh, it starts next week. We don't know React. Just kidding. Didn't go quite that way. But we had just spent 7 months doing Angular 2, and then we needed to teach a React bootcamp, right? So we just kept switching technologies. So in his first year here, he worked on like a million different platforms or different tech stacks. So it was kind of, in his quest to just kind of become as good a developer as he could in as short a time as possible, it actually ended up, I think, being a pretty good system if we had done it on purpose to just kind of get him going as fast as we could. Yeah.
Sweet. So TechPoint asked you to do React. So like if you had a choice.
Oh yeah. Well, whatever. I mean, I'm glad we did React.
Yeah.
If we did it again, I would do React. But yeah,
Angular's
we did.
good, but-
Yeah, we did Angular last year, but there are a lot of local companies using React. There are quite a few doing Angular as well, but yeah, they requested React, but they told us a year ago. So yeah.
So what's the major one that's used the most?
They're both really common. They're both really widely used.
Large enterprise tends more towards Angular because it's a full framework supported by Google, but yeah, a lot of people use React too. So.
Yeah. React is part of a balanced breakfast because it is just kind of the view layer. Yeah.
Do you have any fretless stickers?
Oh man, why didn't I bring some fretless gear? That was dumb. I don't think so. I have a few plastic business cards. And they're clear. They're pretty neat.
They're pretty neat.
So it is. Gosh, it's after 4:30, so I don't want to keep you. But thank you.